Hello and welcome back to the Nutrition and Life channel. My name is Lisa. I'm your host. I'm the owner and operator of Nutrition Coaching and Life, where we help people lose body fat, gain muscle, and improve their body composition and relationship with food. I have another research recap for you. Today, I'm reading from the April issue of Body by Science, my favorite research review. And before I dig into today's article, I would just ask you to please subscribe, to give us a rating if you're listening to this on the podcast, and to simply leave me a comment if you enjoy this channel, because I do put a lot of effort, a lot of love into the content that we try to provide. I myself am very interested in the latest research as it pertains to exercise and nutrition, of course, to help my clients, but also for my own sake. So if you share this love, please, please, please share this video, for example, with someone you who think might find it interesting as well, or simply give me a thumbs up. That means a lot as well. So without further ado, we're going to get into today's article, which is titled, "Does increasing meal frequency cause greater fat loss?" Something you may have wondered in the past, or maybe you are still wondering, and that's why you're here. In any case, the study that we're reviewing is quite recent. It is titled, "Meal Frequency Does Not Affect Weight Loss in Overweight or Obese Women, but Affects the Body Composition," a randomized controlled trial by Koroglu et al. In 2024. And I will put this in the show notes, just as well as the link to Body by Science. Again, it's Bill Campbell's research review, my favorite research review. I have tested or have read Mass. I've read Alan Aragon's research review, also very, very good journals, but I love the way that Bill communicates the findings of whatever studies he's reviewing. And so I just want to share that with you as best as I can. And so, yes, you might think by the title, right, okay, you've kind of given everything away. Why do we even need to read it? But please bear with me. So to give you some background information, it may be a little bit hard to believe, but about 15 years ago, Bill thought that a higher meal frequency was superior to a lower frequency in terms of metabolic rate and body composition. This was a very commonly held belief in the space. There were some of the comments that would often be found online, for example, eat a lot of small meals throughout the day to boost your metabolism and increase fat loss. Or by eating 5 to 6 small meals per day, you will increase your energy levels, accelerate muscle growth, and speed up your metabolism without storing fat. Another comment, frequent eating will actually allow you to eat up to 50% more calories without storing an ounce of body fat. Yeah, right, wish. You need to eat at least 6 meals per day, spaced 2 to 3 hours apart. That will ignite the metabolic furnace and enhance fat loss. Well, inherent with these quotes and logic was that if one were to eat more frequently as opposed to less frequently, each meal and feeding opportunity would increase metabolic rate, such that the person would be burning so many more calories throughout the day that they would have a hard time gaining body fat. It was as if increasing meal frequency was protective against gaining weight. I remember this time very well as a young professor and researcher. This is Bill talking. I was tasked, along with my colleague and friend Paul LaBounty, to write a position stand on this topic for the International Society of Sports Nutrition. Dr. LaBounty and Bill recruited a team of scientists and fitness professionals to assist them with the project. He remembers this part very vividly. And he recalls that at this time, the consensus was that eating more frequent meals per day was better than eating fewer meals per day for both metabolic rate and body composition. As the project leaders on this paper, Dr. LaBounty and Bill did the initial research and read the available publications on this topic. He called Dr. LaBounty and said something like, I cannot find any intervention-based research that supports that increasing meal frequency is better than a lower meal frequency for metabolism and body composition. And his reply was, I know, I'm seeing the same thing. What we were able to find was a lot of retrospective observational studies that came to the nearly universal conclusion that a higher meal frequency was better than a lower meal frequency with respect to body weight or obesity. Now, let's talk about the problem of retrospective observational studies and reverse causation. In the context of meal frequency research, we have two main types of research studies that can be conducted. An intervention study, so for example, a randomized controlled trial like the one that we're examining today, or a retrospective observational study. The best type of study design is referred to as an intervention type study, which would be best designed as a randomized controlled intervention. Under such a study design, researchers would take subjects with the same body weight or body composition at the start of the study and randomize half of them to a high meal frequency and the other half to a low meal frequency group. A great intervention study would have both groups eat the same total daily calories, consume the same macronutrient ratios, and control the amount of exercise the subjects do. For example, let's say the researchers set total daily calories of 2,400 calories per day for 3 months. One group was randomized to consume 6 meals per day, so 400 calories per meal, and the other group would be randomized to consume 3 meals per day, so 800 calories per meal. The only difference between these two groups would have been the number of meals consumed over 24 hours, and consequently the size of these meals as either smaller, more frequent meals, or larger, less frequent meals. At the end of this hypothetical 3-month study, if the higher meal frequency group had less body fat than the lower meal frequency group, we would conclude that this was due to higher meal frequency, since this was the only thing that was different between the two groups. A retrospective observational study, however, examines past data or events to investigate relationships between exposures and outcomes without manipulating or intervening in the study participants. In the context of meal frequency, the exposure is how many meals the subjects eat per day, and the outcome is their current body weight. These studies have historically reported that the people who weighed the most were those who reported that they eat only a few meals per day, let's say 2 to 3 meals per day. In contrast, the respondents who were not overweight are typically reported eating many times per day, say 5 or 6 times per day. Because this consistent outcome among these type of observational studies, people often conclude that eating fewer meals per day causes one to become overweight. Do you see what's happening here? People were inferring causation, but it was only a correlation. Here's some probing questions about these types of studies. Whom do you think is more likely to lie on a survey about their eating habits, a person with obesity or a normal weight individual? Well, Bill would think that a person with obesity is more likely to lie about their eating habits because they might feel a little bit embarrassed about their current state with respect to their body weight. In such a situation, they wouldn't want to admit that eating many times per day, because they feel that the researchers reading their responses may judge them for eating more frequently. In contrast, a normal weight individual doesn't suffer from the same cultural shame about being overweight, and therefore they reply more truthfully to the question asked about how many times per day they eat. Another question to ask would be, who's more likely to be dieting when taking such a survey? Is it someone who is overweight or obese, or a normal weight individual? It's much more likely that if someone were overweight, they would be dieting when filling out this questionnaire. And what is a common food-related decision people make when dieting? They skip meals. So it's possible that the overweight respondents filling out this questionnaire at the time they provided their answers were dieting and therefore skipping meals to lose weight, and were actually recording their responses truthfully. So they were eating fewer meals. In contrast, normal weight individuals are much less likely to be dieting when filling out these types of surveys, and therefore reply that they eat more meals and do not give it a second thought. Now, a brief notion on reverse causation. So reverse causality or reverse causation is a phenomenon that describes the association of two variables differently than you would expect. Instead of X causing Y, as it is the case for traditional causation, Y causes X. Some people refer to reverse causation as the cart before the horse bias to emphasize the unexpected nature of the correlation. In this case, it wasn't that eating fewer meals per day caused people to become overweight. Instead, it was the fact that overweight people tend to eat fewer meals per day to lose exact body weight, and they happened to be controlled in a survey study at the exact time. So for many years, we only had retrospective observational studies to rely on for information about meal frequency, and nearly all of them reported the same thing. Overweight people consumed fewer calories per day, and lean people consumed more meals per day. Or fewer meals, not calories. That doesn't make any sense. Again, for many years, we only had retrospective observational research studies to rely on for information about meal frequency, and nearly all of them reported the same thing. Overweight people consumed fewer meals per day, and lean people consumed more meals per day. These types of studies propagated the narrative that greater meal frequency was causing leanness and a lower meal frequency was causing obesity. To validate if this is indeed the case, we need intervention studies. That's what I'm going to summarize in this issue. The study we're reviewing below is the most recent intervention study that investigated the effects of meal frequency and body composition outcomes. So who was in this study? We had 40 overweight women that volunteered to participate in this study. The average age of the subjects was 42 years old, average ranges from 19 to 64. And the average weight for the subjects was 186 pounds or 85 kilos. The average BMI was 33, and to be eligible for the study, the participants also had to have the following characteristics: not diagnosed with any chronic disease, not taking any drugs or multivitamins, mineral supplements, not made any changes to their physical activity or eating habits for weight loss in the last 6 months, and to have a current BMI of greater than 27. What did the researchers do? So this was a parallel randomized controlled trial with a 3-month weight loss intervention program. The word parallel means that the women were randomized into 2 different parallel groups and prescribed the same calorie restricted diet for the same amount of time. The intervention was that the number of meals the 2 groups of subjects were allowed to eat per day differed. The two groups of subjects in the study were high meal frequency group, so 3 meals and 3 snacks per day, or a low meal frequency group, 3 meals per day. The primary outcome of the study were changes in total fat mass and body fat percentage. So when looking at the nutritional details, we see that at baseline, the subjects met with a dietitian to fill out a 3-day food record, which was used to determine non-dieting maintenance calories. The subjects continued meeting with the dietitian every week, and they also continued to record all food intake for 3 days each week during the 3-month study. The 3-day food record included 2 weekdays and 1 weekend day. Once the researchers had determined the subjects' maintenance calories, all subjects, regardless of which group they were randomized to, were placed on a 500-calorie deficit for the remainder of the study. The study dietitian created individualized diets for each subject, and the macronutrient ratios of the reduced calorie diet were 45 to 60% carbs, 10 to 20% protein, 20 to 35% fat, so kind of low in protein, but anyway. The low meal frequency group was encouraged to eat only 3 meals per day, breakfast, lunch, and dinner, to reach their allotted dieting calories. And the high meal frequency group was encouraged to eat 6 meals per day, breakfast, snack 1, lunch, snack 2, dinner, snack 3, to reach their allotted dieting calories. The snacks contained 50 to 200 calories. During their weekly visits with the study dietitian, the subjects' weight loss and compliance with the diet were monitored. Also, the subjects' questions were answered during these weekly visits with the study dietitian. Looking at the exercise details now, there was no exercise program or exercise prescription for the study. What was done concerning exercise was the researchers assessed the subjects' physical activity levels to make sure there were no differences between the 2 groups at the start of the study, and to ensure that there was no change in the physical activity of the participants during the 3-month study. The subjects filled out a 24-hour physical activity recall questionnaire, which asked them to list all their exercise and physical activities that took place the preceding day. The researchers then took this data and calculated the total calories burned from the exercise the subjects were doing. The researchers multiplied the energy cost of an activity by time spent with that activity in a typical day. The goal was for the subjects to not change any of their regular physical activity patterns during the 3-month study. So what physique-related outcome variables were measured? Bioelectrical impedance analysis, BIA, was used to assess body composition, so total body fat percentage, and lean mass. While body composition assessments were conducted weekly during the entire study, 12 consecutive weeks, will only provide a summary of baseline and end of study measures. So what were the results? As we look at the results of this study, it's important to remember that the study's primary purpose was to investigate the effects of high versus low meal frequency on body composition. So whenever a study intervention prescribes a specific diet for fat loss, the first thing we need to do is look at the nutrition data. Did the subjects follow the nutrition plan? Was it equal between the two groups, and was protein intake the same? These are some of the questions that need to be investigated before we look at the fat loss outcomes. The first thing that jumps out to us is that the two groups consumed significantly different amounts of daily calories at the start of the study. That's not necessarily good to see. One way to prevent this from happening would be at the beginning of the study to match the subjects based on baseline total calorie intake, and then have the two highest calorie consuming subjects paired together and then flip a coin. So randomize one of them to one group and the other to the other group. Then you take the next two highest calorie consuming subjects, pair them together, and once again flip a coin or randomize them to one to the high frequency meal group and the other to the low frequency meal group. You keep doing this until you get to the last pair of subjects and consuming the lowest amount of baseline calories, and then randomize them to the two groups. This match randomization is commonly done in research studies and is a way to guarantee that the subjects from both diet groups will be very close in terms of their baseline calorie intakes. Even though the high meal frequency group consumed significantly more calories than the low meal frequency group at the beginning and during the study, the relative caloric deficits were nearly identical. The high meal frequency group had a 26.7% caloric deficit during the 3-month study, and the low meal frequency group had a 26.4% calorie deficit. This is huge because both groups reduced their calories to the same relative extent. Therefore, when we look at the results of the study, we can acknowledge that both groups dieted to the same relative extent as each other, and we can assume that any differences in weight loss would be due to meal frequency differences and not because one group dieted harder than the other. Okay, so looking at body composition, the results are a little bit frustrating. At first, the authors of the study present their data indicating that there was no difference in fat loss between the two groups using absolute values, so total body fat mass and body fat percentage values. And then they go on to analyze their data using percentage-based differences and declare that there were statistically significant differences. We'll elaborate on this a little bit later, but for now, we're going to summarize their data as we would summarize our own fat loss research data. Then we'll address the extra data analysis and how that fits into the overall interpretation of the study and meal frequency in general. So both groups lost about the same amount of total body weight. The high meal frequency group lost 16.5 pounds or 7.5 kilos, and the low meal frequency group lost 15.5 pounds or 7 kilos of body weight. As you may know from listening to this research recap or reading Body by Science, we never make conclusions based on body weight alone. If the data is available, we have to pull back the curtain to see what the composition of the weight loss was comprised of in terms of body fat and muscle mass changes. But thankfully, there were no significant differences between the high meal frequency group and the low meal frequency group for any body composition variable. While the high meal frequency group did lose 1.5% more body fat, this difference did not meet the threshold for statistical significance. We also want to look at the composition of the total body weight lost and calculate what percentage was from body fat stores and what percentage was from lean mass stores. In this study, the high meal frequency group lost 87% of their body weight from fat tissue and 13% from lean tissue. The low meal frequency group lost 85% of their body weight from fat tissue and 15% from lean tissue. Therefore, the composition of weight loss was nearly identical between the two groups. So the conclusion from the study should be obvious. When both groups dieted to the same extent, there was no difference in the amount of body fat and lean mass changes, whether 6 daily meals were ingested or 3 daily meals. However, for some reason, the authors of the study had to complicate things. So here's the last sentence in the conclusion section from the study abstract. When energy restricted and balanced weight loss programs are applied, alteration in body weight BMI and waist circumference is not affected from meal frequency, but body composition does. Or does? Or is? Anyway. In the discussion section of the published study, the authors state, however, eating 3 meals plus 3 snacks decreases total body fat and body fat percentage and increases fat-free mass percentage significantly more than compared with the 3-meal group. So looking at the body composition figure in the study again, we can ask ourselves how the researchers can make these claims when the data clearly shows that total body fat losses and lean mass changes are nearly the same between the two meal frequency groups. They can make these statements because they did some additional statistical analysis. They calculated the percentage changes for total body weight, total body fat percentage, and lean mass. So for body fat percentage, they essentially calculated a new value that was a percentage of a percentage. So again, we'll explain what they did with the body fat percentage so that you know the mathematical operations in case you find this meaningful in your interpretation of the study. So the high meal frequency group went from a body fat percentage of 41.5% to 37%. Since this value is already presented as a percentage, body fat percentage, we stop here and acknowledge that this group in the study lost 4.5% body fat. But the researchers went a step further in the study and calculated a percentage of a percentage by determining how much of a percentage of body fat percentage was lost. They did that by using an equation of body fat percentage divided by starting body fat percentage times 100, which came to 10.8%. So this percentage change for body fat percentage, or again, for the high meal frequency group, that was 10.8% and was 7.7% for the low meal frequency group. When the researchers ran a statistical test comparing 10.8% to 7.7%, this difference reached the threshold for statistical significance. They did the same thing for changes in lean mass percentage to make the claim that a higher meal frequency caused a greater rate of increase in fat-free mass percentage. Bill personally doesn't like this. It gives the impression that the researchers were trying to find any statistical analysis comparison they could until they found a significant difference that they could report and subsequently interpret their study by claiming that a higher meal frequency was superior to a lower meal frequency. It's possible that other scientists would come to a different conclusion about this extra statistical analysis that they then build it. Or maybe you would too. But yeah, he's not too fond of it. He wants to summarize this study, or he wanted to summarize the study for us because it's possible that it will get some traction and People will claim that a high meal frequency will cause more body fat losses and greater increases in lean mass. But as we know, many people will only read the abstract of a study, and if that's all that they read from the study, they will easily come to this conclusion. So if someone were to tout this new meal frequency study and claim that a higher meal frequency decreases total body fat and body fat percentage and increases fat-free mass percentage significantly more than a low meal frequency, you can ask them 3 questions. Did the higher meal frequency group lose more body weight than the low meal frequency group? The answer is no. Did the higher meal frequency group lose more body fat than the low meal frequency group? The answer is no. Did the higher meal frequency group lose more body fat percentage than the low meal frequency group? The answer is no. The difference did not reach the threshold for statistical significance. And lastly, did either of the meal frequency groups gain lean mass during the study? The answer is no. During the study, both groups lost about 2.2 pounds of lean mass. So to reiterate, the researchers could only say that the high meal frequency group lost more body fat and gained significantly more lean mass by doing additional statistical tests in which they calculated percentage differences from the absolute differences. And that were reported in the study. So in Bill's opinion, this appears to be a fishing expedition or what scientists call data snooping, a situation where researchers keep running additional tests until they get the outcome that they want. That's not so good. So his interpretation of the study is that a higher meal frequency is no better or worse than a low meal frequency under dieting conditions in which the same relative reduction in calories is equal between two groups. So practically, that means a client can choose a meal frequency protocol that works best for them. Some clients may prefer smaller, more frequent meals when dieting, and others may prefer larger meals less frequently. So just as a side note, there was one other study that was very similar to this one that we just reviewed. The other study was published in 2010 and included males and females, also with obesity, just like the study we reviewed just now. The subjects were placed on a diet for a few months and randomized to a high meal frequency group, 3 meals and 3 snacks, and a low meal frequency group, 3 meals. All of the subjects dieted to the same extent, and at the end of the study, there was no differences between the 2 meal frequency groups relative to body weight, body fat percentage, and lean mass changes. So to round us off, we do want to look at the study's strengths and limitations. So first, beginning with the strengths, the frequency of the food record collection was definitely a strength. The subjects were required to complete a 3-day food record weekly during the study. This was a reasonable and practical requirement because if subjects are required to fill out food records more often, they get respondent fatigue and may not fill out the food forms accurately or may even be tempted not to fill them out at all. Another strength was the role of the dietitian in the weekly meetings. So the subjects met with the study dietitian every week during the study. The dietitian reviewed the 3-day food records and monitored weight loss and measured body weight composition during each weekly visit. And these weekly check-ins with the study dietitian served to verify compliance with the diet plans and helped to keep the subjects motivated during the study. Now, there, of course, were also some limitations. So the 3-day food records to estimate baseline maintenance calories is a little bit of a limitation. And we just mentioned that it was a strength of the study to have the subjects fill out 3-day food records in each week of the study. However, having a 3-day food record was not a good idea to determine baseline calorie intake. So when subjects first learn how to log their food intake, they will often make mistakes. Most of their mistakes would have been made during the first week of the study, since this was likely a new skill for them. In other weight loss studies, we often attempt to get at least 7 days or even 14 days of food intake to determine baseline maintenance calories. Another limitation was very little information about the diet in general. So there was almost no information really provided about the diet. What Was there any food provided to the subjects? What was done to verify that the subjects in the high meal frequency group really consumed 6 meals per day? What was done to confirm that the subjects in the low meal frequency group only consumed 3 meals per day? We don't really have the answers to these questions because the researchers did not provide any information about these things. And then the last limitation mentioned here was the use of a single frequency bioelectrical impedance analysis device. So single frequency BIA devices are typically used in home scales and handheld devices. Multi-frequency BIA devices are much more accurate than single frequency BIA, especially in assessing body composition and fluid compartment. So this is why most research labs use multi-frequency BIA devices. But yeah, that was a lot. I hope you found this interesting. I would love to hear your thoughts concerning meal frequency. What's the typical advice you give to your clients concerning meal frequency, or even that you apply yourself? I personally wholeheartedly agree with Bill in the sense that this is great news, and we can continue to just advise our clients to choose the meal frequency that suits them best in order to meet their caloric and macronutrient targets. I love having that flexibility personally because sometimes you're invited to a meal out, for example, or you're feeling really hungry, so a bigger meal at the time feels best, and then you just skip your afternoon snack and you have your dinner, for instance, rather than being so fixed of like, I need to eat 6 meals per day and they need to be small or whatever. It really depends. It also depends on how well someone digests something. It depends on how full someone likes to feel. We all have different preferences for those kind of things. So yeah, I'd love to hear from you in the comments and just in general what you thought of this study. I will put the link to the study itself and to Body by Science, the research review that I read from, in the show notes. I hope you enjoyed it. Again, if you like this channel, if you like these research recaps, please subscribe, please give us a thumbs up, and I hope you have a wonderful rest of your day. Thank you so much for listening and watching.